Hello, everyone. Welcome back. Last time we discussed simplification of insurance rules. This time I'm joined with my colleague John Davison to explore more on data and reporting and how it affects insurance firms. So, John, let me just start off with the burning question here. How does data actually align with insurance firms' risk profile? How do they merge and where do they meet and integrate?
Well, first of all, demonstrating good consumer outcomes, data is the one critical point of that. I think the important thing is, first of all, understanding what your consumer outcome-based risks are, and then what data measures and maps to that. I think one of the challenges firms have, and where some organizations get this wrong, is that they use process-related data as a proxy for outcome-related data. And that quite commonly then causes disalignment between consumer outcome risk and the potential for harm versus how you measure on a preventative and a detective basis where the harm has actually occurred. So for me, it's understanding your key consumer outcome risks, not purely your process risks, and then finding a way to assess what data is relevant, how that maps to those individual risks, and then what that data is actually telling you. And we link back to what we talked about last time on simplification, and the simplification opportunities create that opportunity for firms to actually rethink that data and actually make sure the data they have is truly outcome based, and isn't using process as a proxy for good customer outcomes.
So, what I hear from what you've just said is that data forms an integral part in everything an organization does end to end. So, now, if that is the case, then should data be looked at from just a compliance perspective, or should firms actually take data more into their organizational decision making and their strategy?
If firms have implemented consumer duty and integrated the concepts and the principles and the letter of consumer duty, then it should be integral to the alignment and the management of the commercial strategy and the business model that the firm has. So from my perspective, compliance information and risk information and information from control functions is part of it. But the data should actually be looking at the customer, and it should be looking at the way in which the firm's engagement with customers operates and whether their commercial arrangements are appropriate and inherently delivering fair outcomes. So it's key as a business tool. It should be data across all lines of defense. And for any organizations that still see this as a compliance imperative or regulatory imperative and not a huge commercial opportunity, they are missing a lot of opportunities to actually improve, enhance, and make better in many ways how they engage with customers and how they then engage with their regulators.
So, data to you is central for our organization's success, is what I hear from that. So, that actually then takes me to the next question. You've got firms collecting n number of KPIs and different metrics in everything that they do. So, now the question is, with so much data, do you need to focus on the quality or do you need to look at the quantity of it?
Quality is key. Quality and relevance is key. Actually, I said earlier on, data, you have to know what data measures, and it has to measure outcomes. It has to measure harm. Firms are trying to prevent foreseeable harm. So that takes data into a risk-based paradigm, and to a forward-looking paradigm, compared with perhaps what we did years back in TCF and conduct risk frameworks. I think one of the challenges firms have, as they build frameworks and they improve frameworks, it's easy to layer data on data on data, add more, add more, add more, rather than synthesize what exists and reposition what exists. So for me, the data has to be relevant, it has to be targeted, it has to measure something, it has to analyze something specific, it needs to be purveyed and presented to management in a way that it tells them a proper story. And if you have data points that you're not clear about what they're measuring, my argument would be, why have that at all?
Thank you. Then, with data and the quality being more important here, we have to think about how we find outcome, because the FCA takes a stand that it's more outcome focused and not process driven anymore. So my question to you is, how do you look at outcomes based on data?
I mean, look, ultimately, a lot of firms, as we said earlier, use compliance with their internal processes as a proxy for we must be doing okay with our customers. And to a certain extent, you have to have an element of process data because you have to know you've handled claims and handled complaints and you've reported them and you've dealt with them and what have you. But actually, you don't necessarily comply with internal processes and be able to make that leap to customers who've got a good outcome. So I think for me, there's outcome data, there is process related data. But if you are using process related data in consumer duty outcome related information to management, for me, that needs to be put in the context of the so what to the consumer. So it may well be that, you know, you've handled all of your complaints on time, and that's great, but it doesn't then answer the question, were the responses fair? Was the customer complaint actually handled in accordance with what the customer's complaint actually was? So it's about contextualizing that, and then putting that into the context of what does this mean for our customer proposition, whether it's broad or whether it's for specific customer cohorts or sectors.
Okay, with that in mind, can that be fed into the strategy, the wider organizational strategy of the firm?
It should be. I mean, effective consumer duty data should help management inform what their commercial strategy should be. So there should be a direct alignment between the way in which an organization wants to drive revenue, which products it drives revenue from, what sources, what types of customers, and on what basis it does that. And then that should relate to the control environment and the measure of whether that strategy is actually inherently and consistently delivering fair outcomes for customers. At the same time, the reverse loop is true. When that data, if it's effective, is properly measuring outcomes, that data then should be fed back into a strategic conversation and compared with things like finance data, risk data, control data, performance data, and built as a package to give management a proper line of sight into, well, is the strategy they have set up and asked to be implemented by their business, A, being implemented as designed and as said, number two, is it delivering what it should be delivering, both financially for the firm and in terms of for the customers? And three, if not, then actually why is it not doing that? And what should management change in that strategy or the way that strategy is implemented by their business?
Thank you so much, John. So just to summarize the conversation we have had, data now takes the center stage in not just your strategic outcomes, but also in your customer outcomes. You need to differentiate between good quality data, which are key KPIs, and segregate them from noise and process-driven data, which just gives you a cloud and prevents the board from taking effective decision. So your data and your data strategy is key and vital to your business growth and your customer outcome. So thank you so much for your time today.
Pleasure.
Until next time. Thank you.
Thanks.